Mel, everybody, I'm Cantonese Cat. Hey everybody, Cantonese Cat here. Chinese market, I haven't talked about it for a while. Let's talk about it real quick. I still think that it's turning more positive. This is the Hang Seng Index, which is based in Hong Kong, but pretty much the majority of the big Chinese company are listed there. If you really want to look at the pulse of the Chinese market, look no further than the Hang Seng, and it looks like it warrants to potentially do a little bit of an Adam and Eve pattern here. And it looks like it wants to reclaim the Tenkan, the conversion line, on the monthly chart. This is a monthly chart. Before then, it tried to reclaim the Tenkan, but it just wasn't able to do so. And it just ended up dipping down underneath. And now it's trying to do that again, getting rejected here by a little bit of a downtrending Kijun line, the red line over here, and now it's just stuck in a range. And it looks like right now we're getting a little bit more closer to the bottom of the range than the top. The bottom range is going to be around 17,200, somewhere around there. And could it potentially wick down below? Yes, there's always a possibility. Could it end up closing down below and go down further? Yes, there's that possibility. But things are looking a little bit better. It just looks like it wants to do a basing behavior over here, even though the Chinese economy overall is not that great. But I do believe that there's enough liquidity injected that there might be enough to stay in the Chinese market for you to potentially form a little bit of basing behavior on the Hang Seng. You are talking about a little bit of a ranging market over here, though. So far, you've really been ranging for about 3 months now, and not really doing a whole heck of a lot, really boring a lot of people, right? But there are some pretty positive signs. Like if I just look at the weekly, you can see how price still wants to use the kitchen as support, and price has finally broken back inside the cloud and is trying to potentially find some support over here, trying to bounce above the cloud and get back out of the cloud, right? You really would want to see the Hang Seng break the cloud and get back above, maybe do a little bit back test before going up higher, and that would be a very, very bullish thing. It so far has not really been doing that quite just yet, but it looks like there's a potential for it to be, doing that soon, maybe, right? But if you also look at the Bollinger Band, there's something of a character change here too, because again, this is the monthly chart. So you're going to see the Bollinger Band, you're going to see the 20-month moving average. And the 20-month moving average, no wonder it didn't break back above, right? Because it's very, very negative sloping. It was just slope. It's just going down and push. It was serving as some pretty strong resistance over here back in January, February 2023. And again, back in July and August 2023. And right now, there's a little bit of a change in behavior in terms of the market. The 20-month moving average is no longer straightly negative sloping. You actually have a period of time where it started to positive slope, even though it did still serve as resistance. As you can see, it still serves as resistance, but it's starting to flatten out. And the very fact that it's starting to flatten out tells me that there is now a chance for the Chinese market, for Hang Seng, to really break back above the 20 and then maybe back test the 20 and go up higher. And when you talk about Hang Seng being in such a slump down here, even if it makes a little bit of a high, even if it gets up to like the upper Bollinger Band over here, which currently is around 21,300, 400, somewhere around there, that's still a pretty significant amount of gain, and that could potentially signify a longer term trend change, right? Overall, if you're looking at the longer time frame, is this a chart that I would necessarily want to buy? I don't know. This is the Hang Seng really since 1987. Does it look like a chart that I would want to buy compared to the SPY, right? I don't know. It's just unfortunate. And there's a lot of things that happen too. For example, really around like 2019 or 2020 or so, there has been some trade conflict between U.S. and China, and that had really taken, I think, a hammer in terms of how the Chinese economy has performed. So longer term, I'm not sure, but shorter term, could it be a good trade? I think it might be. It really depends on how lazy I want to be. If I just want to be an investor, I probably wouldn't necessarily get into Chinese stocks at this point, just because of the longer term trend. There really isn't a trend ever really since like 2 decades ago. But the short term trend, I think we might be forming a little bit of basing behavior. I think it's not bad as like a swing trade or a longer term swing trade, if you will. But I probably wouldn't, necessarily put my money on it. But I'm seeing some pretty positive things here. With KWEB, which is going to be more the Chinese internet ETF, these are more, tech heavy, if you will. You can see that it's basically doing a very similar thing. Hit a bullish cross, and then it also seemed to want to backtest the kitchen, the red line over here. And so far, it looks like it's forming a little bit of a support, And it's not a bad look. It does look like it wants to base here as well. And if you are also looking at the weekly chart, it also looks very similar to the Hang Seng, where it's back inside the cloud. It's trying to find some support to bounce from. And I think it's all we have to do is just really go sideways a little bit and be exiting the cloud, and maybe even backtest the cloud and go higher. But so far, it's still inside the cloud, still stuck inside, But I do see some more, positive things that are being developed here. Look at the monthly. If I just do the Bollinger Band, you can also see that this downtrend might have been over on the 20-month moving average. And you're also having a little bit of a Bollinger Band squeeze so far here. So I think that there might be a little bit of a trend change and a big move might be coming soon. If you ask me which way it's going to do, because the trend change of the 20-month moving average sloping from downwards to flat, and you have a Bollinger Band squeeze over here, it does look like most likely it wants to go up moving forward. Obviously, none of these things are guaranteed, right? But it does look like it's forming a base over here. And this is generally how a bear trend generally end up forming a base, right? And I do feel a little bit better in terms of these, Chinese stocks in terms of how they look. One big one that everybody's going to be interested in is BABA. Is BABA a good buy? I don't know that. Initially I thought it might be if it ends up recovering, if the Chinese market ends up recovering. But just look at like how KWEB is looking. KWEB is looking better than BABA. I'm not making that up, right? KWEB is looking better than BABA. And there's just a little bit of a lack of momentum now. It doesn't mean that it won't catch up and go to like the triple digits, in a hurry if it ends up things catching on. But it's just lagging a little bit, and it may not necessarily be my choice to buy if I was going to enter into the Chinese trade, right? It just doesn't seem like it's the most favorable chart out of all the Chinese tech stocks. The Ichimoku Cloud, you can see that, on the KWEB, you can see that at least it's trying to reclaim the Tenkan. The blue line here on the on BABA is still serving as resistance. So BABA is lagging behind. And if you also look at the Bollinger Band, that is flattening out, but it's still kind of a little bit further underneath the 20-month moving average. So it's still not quite done with forming its base, if you will. Granted, things can change in a hurry, but it just doesn't look as nice as what KWEB is doing overall, right? The other stock to look at in terms of the Chinese market, one that has garnered a lot of attention, would be JD. JD looks even worse than BABA, right? JD just looks like it's a big downtrend. There's a lot of momentum still going down. This still looks relatively like a falling knife. And you just have a shooting star candle over like a couple months ago. So JD is a little bit more worrisome. If you also look at the technicals, it's still using the Tenkan as resistance, right? And if you are looking at the weekly chart, it's still underneath the Ichimoku Cloud, right? Same thing, like BABA is still underneath the Ichimoku Cloud. It's not like KWEB where it's back inside. BABA is underneath the weekly Ichimoku Cloud and serve as resistance, and so is JD. It serve as resistance, So I cannot necessarily be that bullish on BABA and JD, but and on top of that, if I look at the monthly again, if I turn off the Ichimoku Cloud, if I just use the Bollinger Band here, you can see that it's still very much a downward sloping 20-month moving average, and we just got rejected a couple of months ago. So I can't really see enough technicals for me to want to enter JD at this point. On Tencent's got a very different look to it. Tencent is unfortunately is an over-the-counter stock in the US, but it's actually looking relatively more bullish than Baba, and it also looks more bullish than JD, right? You had a bullish cross, and currently price is above the Tenkan. It's currently finding resistance here at this horizontal zone over here, so it's made a lot more progress than JD and Baba or even KWEB. It's made a lot more progress than even KWEB, right? And sure, you have a big volume shelf over here. You have a hard time breaking above. Could price end up coming back down from the current level around 50, around 47? Could it come down to like the low 40s, like 42? Could it even come back down and back test this Tengen line over here before going push back above this, 50 resistance zone and get to test the cloud up here? You're going to still end up having some resistance up here on the cloud, right? But this is relatively a very nice, more bullish chart, if you will, because it just formed a higher low. So this is a very, very nice, looking chart, and it looks like it's just having a hard time breaking through on relatively low volume. We'll see what happens, but there are some charts on the Chinese stock market, especially on the AI side, on the tech side, that seem to be relatively bullish. Now, you also have the PDD chart, Pinduoduo. It looks relatively bullish too, because it's just been forming nothing but higher lows and higher highs. And right now we just have a hard time breaking above the zone over here. But it's looking like it's forming like a very nice ascending triangle, if you will. So I would say around like 150 is going to be a pretty strong resistance zone that it needs to break above. But currently the Tenkan looks like it wants to push price higher. It looks like it's serving as support. Could it break down? Could the ascending triangle end up breaking down? Sure it can. Are there any support levels down below? Yes, you do. It doesn't necessarily have to come down all the way down to like 100, but there is a lot of support underneath below, right? Even on the weekly chart, could it come back down all the way to like 125 potentially to test the top of the cloud after it tested the top of the cloud bounce, and then now it's just kind of do another cloud tap and go higher? That's also a possibility, right? But this downtrend is also on low volume, on declining volume, right? So that's also something to think about. Uptrend on high volume, downtrend on low volume. That's something to think about. I think things are just consolidating sideways underneath important 150 resistance. And it might end up tapping the cloud down here a few dollars down further before going up, or it might end up breaking down below and go back to the cloud. Certainly a possibility, right? Nothing's guaranteed, but I'd like the way that it looks. It is trying to find support at the bullish support band. It did end up breaking below it a little bit, just like it did before over here. So is that a guarantee that's going to have it going down further just because it lost support band? Not necessarily, right? I still think that the PDD chart still looks pretty bullish. The only problem I think is there's a lot of like fundamental fears, I think, if you will. Like the US might end up changing. They're the parent company of TAMU, and you might end up having, yourself buying, or somebody buying a lot of things from TAMU for cheap, and they ship it for cheap, and they're basically using some really cheap shipping rates to ship internationally, especially to the US, right? So are they end up potentially changing the law, if then end up impacting the fundamentals of PDD? Or if there are any other things that are impacting fundamentals of PDD, it might not looking as bullish, right? But so far, it's been forming nothing but higher highs and higher lows. And I cannot really technically be bearish on this chart. And if you, if you just look at this, it just looks like a nice bull trend, But does it look like it might potentially end up getting a little bit of a rollover look to it and getting a little bit exhausted? That's also a possibility too, right? So I think most likely it's going to have some bullish continuation. And I would like to see it kind of really truly break above this range and go up a lot higher. But I'm more bullish than I'm bearish on PDD. And if I have to buy Chinese tech stock, I'll probably end up buying Tencent or PDD. There's another one that's been on my radar that that I feel relatively bullish about, which is FUTU. FUTU, initially I thought it was just going to come back down and maybe back test the Tenkan around 62.74. But it looks like it's a little bit below so far. The month still have a few more days of trading days on to it. So could it end up just be a wick and up getting back above? Certainly possible. I think that if anything, it's just back testing this very important horizontal zone over here around like 60, like little $60 somewhere around there. So do I think that this is potentially a decent buy after it just broke out above this ascending triangle? It just looks like an ascending triangle to me. and these are generally very, very bullish kind of look to it. Is it just a breakout of the ascending triangle and back test, and then we go higher? There's a possibility. Honestly, if I had to buy a Chinese stock, which I'm still on the cups of debating whether or not to do that or not, if I end up buying one, it probably would be FUTU because of the way that the technical looks. If you don't know, like FUTU is kind of like very similar to like a Robinhood in Asia. It's popular in a lot of Asian countries, especially including like the Southeast countries, things like that. A lot of Singaporeans, I think, use FUTU. It's not looking bad. If the U.S. Stock market keeps on going up, especially if we end up having a rotation to small caps, and if a lot of people want to speculate on U.S. Stock internationally, FUTU might end up being a big beneficiary for that move. So we'll see. But FUTU has one of the better charts in Chinese stocks. Now, I'm not always a bull. I have to show you some charts that I'm still bearish on. I'm still bearish on NIO. I cannot really be that bullish on NIO. The reason why is because on the monthly, it's still way underneath the Tenkan, and that can still be resistance, right? Now, if you're talking about a short-term trade, if you buy here, if you think this is hammer bottom over here, it could be a short-term bottom, and you can go up, and you can certainly get back up to from like 450 to like 650. Like that's still a pretty significant gain. If you want to use like a reversion to the mean kind of trade, that would make sense, I suppose. And that's just an idea, not an advice or anything like that. But you would still have a lot of resistance above. Like I don't see this glory coming back quite just yet. I would like to minimally see it reclaiming the tank and then maybe bounce that and use that as support before going up higher. But certainly right now I don't see that here on the monthly chart. On the weekly chart, it still looks awful. It just got rejected off of the Tenkan, and it's pointing down, right? You still don't have a bullish cross at all, and it's still way underneath the Ichimoku cloud. So technically I cannot be that bullish on this chart yet. So I'm going to stay away from NIO. If you buy it, you'll be catching a falling knife, and you'll be being brave. Could this be the bottom? It could be, but there's no confirmation for that. So you would be just being brave. Just like how like over here when it bottomed, there's no confirmation at all. But if you would have bought that, you would have been brave. But it's not. You're not doing so systematically. You're just guessing. The Bollinger Band with the 20-month moving average continue to go down, right? So that's still a very, very vicious downtrend, and the Bollinger Band is expanding to the downside, allowing it to go down further potentially. So I'm a little bit wary of NIO. I'm not bullish on NIO, and I just want to let you know. On another hand, there's another stock called XPEV, XPEV. That's another one that has also captured a lot of people's imagination. If you look at XPEV, actually, it's a little bit more basing behavior than what NIO is doing, right? It looks a little bit more like a double bottom, but it's still underneath the tank, and it did spend time above and trying to do maintain up here, but it formed a descending triangle and ended up breaking down underneath of it. So could this be a little bit of a double bottom look before challenging the Tenkan up here again? That's certainly a possibility, but then you're also guessing, right? Because the trend is still down, because we're still far away from the Tenkan Kijun, because there's no sign for necessarily any bullish cross. But if you buy this trade, if you're expecting potential reversion to the mean, that's still a pretty significant gain, like a 50% gain. Is there a guarantee that it's going to do that? No, it could go down further, right? But at least that's an idea that I suppose one can entertain, right? Looking at the weekly is also not the greatest, but it at least had a little bit of a bullish cross here on the weekly. Price is still underneath the Tenkan Kijun, got rejected off of it, right? So it's not the best look, but at least it's a little bit better than NIO, the fact that it had a bullish cross, right? But it's still at resistance, and currently like it's look a little bit better than NIO, but it's still at resistance, So I cannot be that bullish on it. If you also look at the Bollinger Band, there's something that is a little bit different on the weekly. Like I said, like could it be a mean reversion going up? You do have a squeezing here, and things are above the bull market support band now, right? So are inside the bull market support band, if you will. But could it be in it like a little bit more squeezing and up pushing up forward? That's a potential trade idea. Is the same thing happening with NIO? Not quite. Like it's still negative sloping, but could XPEV potentially have a little bit more of a bullish trend, if you will, on the weekly in a shorter time frame? possible, right? It's just a trade idea, but I'm not going to get into that. I'm just seeing what I'm seeing. I on the longer time frame on the Bollinger Band, I still wouldn't necessarily enter because it's still way underneath the 20-month moving average, although it is flattening out. So I can imagine if price goes back up to like around $11-12, it would continue to allow the band to end up flattening out even more, and it probably end up getting rejected there initially. Maybe hopefully find some support underneath. I don't know what that would be. The technical still hasn't unfolded, and you might end up getting back above, back tested, and go higher. I can see this. I can visualize this happening with Xpeng. I can still not necessarily visualize that well with NIO. So anyway, I'm not really trying to like trash on your stock. I'm just trying to share you my thoughts in terms of what technicals, how I approach technicals, and what I might do in this situation. I hate being bearish, but it is what I see. So regardless though, if you're going for a reverse into the mean trade, there could be something there, but just be careful. Anyway, take care. Have a good one. Bye.